Imagine it's December 1914. World War I has been tearing Europe apart for nearly 5 brutal months. Millions of young men are huddled in muddy, freezing trenches, a miserable landscape stretching from the North Sea all the way to the Swiss border. This is the Western Front. Death, fear, and a gnawing sense of hopelessness are their constant companions. Every day is a battle for survival against bullets, shells, and the bitter cold. The world they knew, a world of family, warmth, and celebration, feels like a distant dream. But then, on the morning of December 25th, Christmas Day, something extraordinary, something almost magical, began to unfold. It wasn't an order from a general or a politician. It was a spontaneous whisper of humanity that rippled across the frozen, desolate battlefield. Across the shattered landscape known as No Man's Land, soldiers from opposing sides, British and German, began to cautiously peek over the tops of their trenches. No rifles were raised. No aggressive shouts were heard. Instead, a simple, heartfelt message echoed through the crisp winter air. Merry Christmas! At first, a tense silence hung over the battlefield. Was it a trick? A cruel joke? The soldiers held their breath, fingers hovering near their triggers. But then, a sound that hadn't been heard in this place for months broke the tension. Laughter. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a warm, shared moment of relief, and then came the singing. From the German trenches, a familiar melody drifted across the frost-covered ground. It was still not Silent Night. The sound was so pure, so out of place amidst the destruction that it stopped everyone in their tracks. Soon, the British soldiers, recognizing the tune, joined in with their own English lyrics. Voices that had once screamed battle cries were now joined in a fragile, beautiful harmony. This wasn't the sound of war. It was the sound of Christmas. Emboldened by this shared moment, soldiers from both sides started to climb out of their trenches, unarmed and with their hands held high. They walked slowly, hesitantly at first, into the deadly expanse of No Man's Land. This was the space between their worlds, a place littered with the grim realities of war. But on this day, it was transformed into a place of peace. They met in the middle. Men who had been trained to see each other as nothing more than the enemy, now stood face to face. They shook hands. They smiled. They looked into each other's eyes and saw not a monster, but another young man just like them, caught in the same terrible nightmare. They began to exchange gifts, simple treasures that meant the world in that moment. A British soldier might offer a German a piece of chocolate and in return receive a handful of precious cigarettes. They traded uniform buttons as souvenirs, shared family photos, and pointed towards their homes on worn-out maps. One soldier, a young private named Henry, later wrote in his diary, "We stood there together, enemies yesterday, friends today, and we all felt the same thing, peace. It was a feeling I thought I'd never have again. For a few precious hours, the war simply stopped. There was no hatred. There were no battle lines. There was only humanity, raw and undeniable. And then something truly unbelievable happened. Someone produced a football. Right there, in the middle of the battlefield, between the trenches, an impromptu football match kicked off. Germans versus the British. The frozen ground served as their pitch, and their makeshift goals were piles of jackets and helmets. There were no trophies to be won, no grandstands filled with cheering crowds, and no political statements to be made. There was only the pure, unadulterated joy of the game. Laughter and shouts of encouragement replaced the roar of artillery. For a little while, they were just boys playing a game again. These scenes of peace and friendship were repeated up and down long stretches of the Western Front. Soldiers shared food, sang carols, and even held joint burial services for their fallen comrades, paying respects together as equals. It was a testament to the shared humanity that no war, no matter how brutal, could completely extinguish. But this beautiful, fragile peace was not meant to last. As Christmas Day drew to a close and evening began to fall, the reality of their situation started to creep back in. The generals and high commanders, far from the front lines, were furious when they heard about the fraternization. They saw it as a breakdown of discipline, a threat to the very purpose of the war. Stern orders were sent down the line. No more truces. The war had to continue. The soldiers had to remember who their enemy was. Reluctantly, the men returned to their respective trenches. The handshakes became waves, the shared smiles turned to somber nods. By the next morning, the silence was shattered once more. The guns roared back to life. The war was on again. The Christmas Truce of 1914 didn't end the war. It didn't even shorten it by a single day. The conflict would rage on for 4 more years, claiming millions more lives. In fact, such a widespread truce would never happen again. The war became too bitter, the losses too great. But for the men who were there, for those who shared that incredible moment of peace, nothing would ever be the same. They never forgot it. The memory of shaking hands with the enemy, of sharing a song, of kicking a football in no man's land, was seared into their minds forever. It changed their hearts. This remarkable event reminds us of a profound truth, that even in the darkest, most violent of times, our shared humanity can shine through the chaos. It proves something incredibly powerful, that even when nations are at war, the people on the front lines, the individuals caught in the storm, can still choose peace, even if only for a day. The Christmas Truce stands as a timeless beacon of hope, a reminder that the desire for connection and understanding is one of the most powerful forces on earth. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more incredible stories from history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next one.